Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack and this is a Lancia Kappa Coupé. Not only is this a very, very rare car, but it hides an incredible secret. As a replacement for the Timma, the Kappa's design brief was one of quality. The Italians finally wanted to make a car that was up to German standards. As such, the chassis was twice as stiff as the one of the outgoing car. It was also 15% stiffer than the best competitors, so they really kind of went all out to make this a quality product. That's also reflected in the design, which was kept deliberately simple for just this purpose. Now, some of you say that I often class cars as failures when perhaps they're not, but I'll let you decide with this, but all you need to know is that the outgoing Timma sold 335,000 units. The Kappa that replaced it was produced in only 115,000. This, though, is a coupe, and just 3,200 of these were made. Dread to think how many have survived today. It was quite an unusual thing to do at that point in time for this class of car to have a coupe. I guess perhaps it was aimed at some of the Mercs, so they had the equivalent sort of coupes of this size. But as a design, I think forward of the windscreen there, that part of the car is pretty much identical to the saloon. Everything back is different. Maggiora, a coach builder, was tasked with building it and essentially ended up being made mostly by hand. I think the design is pretty successful, especially from the back and the rear three quarters, but funnily enough, Justin, who owns this car, says that's one of the angles that he doesn't like. It's not the prettiest coupe that they have ever made, but I think it does have a certain amount of appeal and class about it. So I said this car had a surprise in store. Have you guessed what it is yet? This is probably the least likely place I would ever expect to find an Alfa Romeo Busso V6. This has the 3-litre 24-valve engine. It was available for pretty much all of the cars run. I think it was produced in 6 years till 2000, the saloon anyway. But it's going to be really, really interesting to see how it performs on the road, because it is matched with an auto gearbox. And although I love a Busso, I wouldn't really ever have thought that it was the right kind of engine for a luxury car. But now, let's see how it drives. So this is quite a high mileage car. It's on about 160,000 miles, and all things considered, it has really fared quite well. The bodywork has been resprayed, but the interior, in terms of the dash, I think that does somewhat validate Lancia's push at the time towards making a quality car. There's only one part which lets the interior down from what I've seen. A lot of the switchgear almost looks a little bit like it was designed in a Germanic way. The buttons all feel pretty good. They've got nice action to them. But this little flip for the stereo, it just feels incredibly horrible and flimsy. The dash architecture and the driving position are also pretty good. I think this car came out in 1996, so by those standards, it was definitely a step forward from the Timma. It uses struts all round, which isn't the most sophisticated setup, and we'll see how it feels here. For the moment, apart from the startup, the Busso, the kind of Bussos that I'm used to, definitely doesn't feel like that's what's powering this car. It's pretty smooth. The steering is very, very light. Car quite chuckable. The body feels quite well controlled, but it deals with the bumps okay as well. That auto gearbox is very smooth, and the engine isn't at these speeds too intrusive. I've just put it in normal at the moment, so I'm going to put it in power when we do a run up the road, but under these circumstances at lower speeds it all feels pretty refined. There are some particularly nice touches that show they tried. You can see how the handbrake lever has a little cover that moves up and down with it just to keep it all looking nice and neat, for example. There were quite a few complaints made about the fake wood that adorns the dash there. It doesn't particularly bother me. Does it do any lasting impression of real wood? Probably not. But I think there have been worse finishes that you could have. The Alcantara isn't known for wearing that well, but I think it can look quite good in a luxury car. But this is what you all want to know. What's the Busso like in an application like this? Okay, so it's on power, and it's a 4-speed auto. A little bit of Busso feel, but I think it's the combination of being in this car, which is very refined, and also having the automatic gearbox really does take a lot of that character away. It's still a very smooth engine, and it feels pretty sprightly considering it's on this 4-speed auto. You can drive the Kappa Coupé with a bit of verve. Now, it has a wider rear track than the standard car, seems to corner pretty flatly, and although the steering is very, very light, it's quite keen to turn in. You get a little bit of feel through once you're in the corner, and the body's very, very well controlled. I think part of the reason why it handles so well has to be that stiff bodywork. Now, obviously, I haven't pushed it to the extremes, but this isn't the kind of car that you'd really drive at the edge all the time anyway. Driven pretty quickly, it really is acquitting itself very well. Now, in Italy, you had a big surcharge for anything above 2 litres, so the 3-litre engine, the V6, this one, would have been quite a rare choice. Not just that, but the Kappa itself, I think the base version, when launched in '97, was £28,000, and that would have been for the 2-litre naturally aspirated engine. So it was a very expensive car. You can see why in the end it just didn't end up selling very much. Okay, let's see what it's like on the little S's. It's a big car, let's not forget. It's got a pretty good amount of grip. It doesn't lean very much. The body control is great. It does scrub into understeer when you start pushing it past its limit, but all things told, it's pretty good. Brakes are excellent, doesn't dive too much. The front end definitely likes to scrub off speed once you're past a certain limit. But look, for a car that wasn't designed to be driven like this, it's quite impressive. Way to get a bit of Busso feel in this is to sort of get it to hover around 3.5 in power, and then just put your foot down, and from 3 till the red line, which is about 7, you do get, it's still a reduced Busso experience, but you do get some Busso feel from it. You've got to think about it though as, just forget the Busso, because the Busso is an overly sporting engine, and in the Kappa Coupé, it does work pretty well. Perhaps it even works better when it's not being sort of pulled to the edges, as I've done here, revved right through the range. It feels like it's the kind of car that you don't want to keep in power, you want to keep it in normal mode, and then just makes swift progress. So how to judge the Kappa and the Kappa Coupé? Okay, well, they didn't sell enough of them, that much is clear. I think it was part of the overall trend because this was also the time when the Citroën XM and the Ford Scorpio, it was the dying days of this class of car. The Germans kind of wiped them off the market and everything else was moving in another direction. Were they good cars? I haven't driven a saloon. I think it's going to feel quite different to this, so I'll reserve judgment on that. It did look a little bit too plain in some ways, but based on the Coupé, the interior was nice, quality is definitely a step up. I think it handles pretty well. The ride at lower speeds is maybe a little bit too bitsy, but body control is almost exemplary, I'd say. It is a shame that the front wheel drive means that eventually, if you do push it a bit too far, it will go into understeer, but it's not a car that you would drive like that very often, if ever. Bearing that in mind, the Coupé now is quite a special thing because you will not see another one on the road or anywhere, most probably. It's definitely classy, and as a modern classic, I think a really, really interesting car. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing that and hitting the notification bell because it really does make a difference. If you have a car that you would like me to do a review on, one of your own cars, please get in touch with me. These are the best contact details. Thank you all so much for watching, and I really look forward to seeing you all soon.